Welcome to PsychicBent. My name is Carrie.
And I'm Kim. We are two sisters wanting to help other psychics learn and grow in their abilities and to help educate about spirits, angels, and everything psychic.
Welcome back, listeners, to PsychicBent. We're real excited, like we always are, for this episode. We finally are doing this episode. We always talk about how we have a plan, and then Spirit seems to have a different plan, and then we finally get back on track. So we are back on track, and this episode, we are going to talk about shadow work. Now, there's shadow work that is psychological shadow work, and then there's spiritual shadow work. And so we're talking about the spiritual shadow work, correct?
Well, yeah, I would say both, actually. I personally find them to be interchangeable myself because
they help you with pretty much the same information, but there's you could integrate it with different types of spirituality.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now, Kim, what did you think? Because when I first suggested shadow work, what was your reaction? Do you remember?
I thought it was a good idea. I know where you want to go because a lot of people think shadow work is, ooh, that's dark, that's spooky, that's evil.
Yeah. And, as a light worker, you do still have to deal with the dark.
Yes.
So it's the yin and the yang. And I think a lot of people, whether we're talking the spiritual shadow work or actual psychological shadow work, they're not comfortable with it because it's facing things that are uncomfortable to face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I figured this would be perfect one for Kim because she could go as left brain as she wants. And she has.
Maybe. We'll see how it goes.
Okay. Well, Kim, why don't you tell us about shadow work?
Okay. Well, I would say that when I first started really doing my part of the research from the very beginning of the podcast, over a year ago, almost 2 years ago, if you would have said shadow work to me back then, I would have said, oh, that's the dark side. I don't want to go there. That's creepy, scary. And why do we want to work like that? Why do we want to do anything like that?
Yeah, and I think that's a common misconception. That's a common reaction when you're just starting out.
Yeah. And, nobody really likes to hear about the dark side. And the dark side does seem to be scary phrasing. But we all have, as we're standing out in the sunlight and you look around, you have that shadow that is from the sun in your body, and that shadow's not scary. So when we say dark side and shadow work, we're just really talking about our inner self and our shadow self. It's what ego uses the shadow self or the dark things, quote unquote dark things from our childhood, from our own thoughts. That's what ego feeds on to kind of deter us from doing what it is that we really want to accomplish.
Yeah, and
does that make sense?
Well, yeah. I think what you're trying to say is, you're facing aspects of yourself that you've buried, in like unconscious fears or suppressed desires, wounds, or truths that you may not want to admit about yourself. Because that's the thing about inner work is taking a close look at yourself, and whether it's a past wound that needs to be healed, or self-forgiveness, or whatever, that takes work, and we don't like to do that kind of work.
Right.
Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
I mean, most people no one goes, yes, let's do some inner shadow work today. It's not that enthusiasm. When you're first starting to try to figure out to deal with, we all have shadow aspects. We all have little things hidden down that we have suppressed because life has happened. Whether it's a high school trauma or a grade school trauma or just a work trauma or a relationship trauma. There's so many aspects that we run into all the time that can create something that we unconsciously suppress or we bury down deep because we don't want to deal with it.
And it really begins with birth, from birth, because you are taught that as an infant how you're supposed to behave in your personal environment, in your environment with your family, with your siblings. You try to explore something, express something as a baby, and you learn when, no, 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 we don't do that. When you fall, you want to cry because you got hurt, and you may be told, oh, no, 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 you don't cry. You're fine. Just get up. You're fine. Not allowed to just express yourself that you've hurt yourself. You know what I'm saying? It could be something as
Yeah.
simple as that, just
Yeah.
because you fell and you cried. So then you start to think, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't cry when I hurt myself.
Maybe
That
crying.
is,
Yeah. Crying makes you weak.
crying is a bad thing,
Yeah.
or crying, you shouldn't do that. That's
Right.
not a time when you should cry. So you've learned that.
Yeah. There's no crying in baseball. There's no crying in baseball.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But you learn that even as an infant,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone strives every person needs to feel encouragement, needs to feel that they're good enough, needs to feel acceptance in society. They need, or in their households and with their parents, they need to feel that what they do is worth love. And there's times whenever, not intentionally, your parents could signal, or your siblings or relatives could signal to you that they may do something, like you're proud of something that you've done, and you want to hear the praise that, yes, you did do something good, or that's really great, you can do that. But you may hear from them or interpret from them that, that's all right. Yeah, all right. They don't really, it's not the reaction you were expecting. So then you're like, oh, well, maybe this isn't such a good thing that I did, or maybe this isn't as good as what I thought it was. And that's what is something that you're learning, which is going to be suppressing you from doing something that you thought you would enjoy as a child. So a lot of this comes from the child thoughts and behaviors that you've been taught, quote unquote, taught to either suppress or do or not express, or don't do that behavior, things like that. So that's your dark side. That all gets locked away in your subconscious mind, and that is how you are, as an adult, or as you go through life, you learn, well, I need to not get judged by people. I don't want to get made fun of, so I'm not going to do this thing, or I'm not going to do that thing. I can remember I think it was like a fifth grade in school, and I had to read out loud, and it was something that I hadn't read before. So everybody was assigned a paragraph as excuse me, to get through a assignment or whatever it was we were reading in the reading section of class, and everybody had to read a paragraph. And I went to read my paragraph, and I stumbled on a couple of words, and there were two people next to me that burst out laughing when I started reading, and I thought, oh, that really makes me feel bad. I don't think I can. I guess I'm not good at reading out loud. That really, I must be terrible at it, because they're laughing at me, and they would laugh every time I would read. It was my turn to read. So that made me feel like I can never be a public speaker. I can't speak out loud. I don't like people making fun of me or laughing at me. That is part of the shadow. That shadow grows.
So
And
Kim, can I ask you a question?
yes,
Do you remember who these people are today, their names?
yes, I do.
Well, we should send them a link to the podcast. They could hear you talk. They could hear you read. And you come a long way, baby.
Well, to me, this isn't really talking in public. This is just having a conversation with our friends out there.
Yes.
Just having a
Yes.
conversation with friends is how I take this. This isn't to me anymore as talking in public. I really do have a problem. I've held myself back from talking in public because I now feel self-conscious and feel like I can't do that.
Because two people bullied you.
Two people made me feel like I was not worthy of
Right.
of reading out loud
So
or
this,
speaking out loud
so
like
this
that.
is a great example of what shadow aspect you could work on,
Yes, exactly. That's
you know,
exactly where I was
right.
going.
So you get past it.
Right. That's how that shadow self works. It gets locked away in your self conscious. You've now convinced yourself because of others' reactions to you, whether they were being kind or not, which we know they weren't being kind. They were being, fifth grade little bullies. But that has not, so it's not, I was treated badly by somebody, cruel or whatever, it is also holding you back from something that you should be able to do. So your shadow is keeping you from exploring everything that you could do because you tried it, someone made fun of you, you felt guilty about it, or you felt bad about it, or uncomfortable, and you didn't want to express yourself that way anymore. So you shut it down. And by doing all that, by shutting that down, that also can affect how you use your psychic abilities as well because you're holding that block back. Where could I be with my psychic abilities if I don't like to speak in public? I've held myself back, and I would need to work on that shadow, that part of my subconscious that is preventing me from speaking out and being able to go in front of a crowd of unknown people and speaking without my lips falling off because they're shaking so hard and my whole body is shaking and I stumble over my words. Well, I do that anyway, but I mean, it's even worse whenever I do get in front of a group of people I don't know. It gets really bad and awkward.
You look for the friendly face when you start out. You look for that friendly face. Like, okay, this person's their eyes are smiling. I'm going to talk to them this whole time and move around a lot. Just don't fall off the
Right,
stage.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those things that happened that are stuck in your subconscious, they are the reasons why you may sometimes just feel anger for someone or jealousy for someone. Why are you feeling those things? There could be something that they are actually doing that you recognize from your past that you were involved in, that you reacted to back then. This may be where your deep fears of feeling unworthy and unlovable and stuff like that. You feel those things sometimes. It may not just be because you dated a narcissist or were married to one and they made you feel that way. You were in a situation, most likely, that you were already feeling that way from something in your past that was in your subconscious, which allowed you to be susceptible to this narcissist because you were already feeling that.
Yes. And sometimes you don't realize you're feeling that because
Exactly.
you haven't, done any self reflection. You look in, yourself and try to figure out. And I'm sorry if I'm getting ahead of you on this, but there's dangers to avoiding doing your shadow work spiritually. It's called spiritual bypassing, and that's when you use the light as a form of escape. So and I've seen this, and I'm sure when I read this to you, Kim, you've seen this in others as well. Using affirmations to suppress negative emotions rather than you process them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Avoiding difficult conversations or personal responsibilities by saying everything happens for a reason. That one kind of
Mm-hmm.
resonates, doesn't it? And
Oh, so far, check,
yeah,
check, check.
yeah. Believing that being high vibrational means ignoring anger, grief, or fear.
Now, that one's interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I thought that one was too because yeah, you have a higher vibration, but you still have moments that make you angry, or you still have grief, and there's still fear. I mean, so just because you're operating from a level of a high vibration does not make you immune to experiencing those experiences. And then judging others for experiencing struggle or darkness while seeing yourself as above it. Now, that kind of avoidance leads to unhealed wounds inauthenticity, and even self-deception. And true spiritual work requires integration, not avoidance. So when we choose not to process that shadow side of us that we're working on, then it's actually hurting us spiritually.
Right, right. Exactly.
Yeah, and and you brought up ego, which we bring up ego a lot in the podcast because ego gets us in trouble. But the spiritual ego of the shadow, the shadow of enlightenment, the shadow does not disappear just because someone claims to be spiritually awakened. In fact, it's going to grow stronger in hidden ways. So signs of the spiritual ego include feeling superior to others because of your spiritual knowledge, thinking you have figured it all out while judging others as unconscious, and using spiritual titles or mystical experiences as validation rather than true inner work. And I think we need to understand that even highly evolved psychics and beings still have shadows. And if we don't integrate it and we just pretend that they don't exist, you're actually giving more power to the shadow aspect, the shadow side of
Hmm.
you. So I thought that was
Right.
interesting.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of us tend to find that we keep repeating bad we keep
The cycle keeps
repeating what
going.
we've done, and the cycle keeps going.
The
Exactly.
darn cycle. You're there again.
Yep, you keep getting into the same type of relationship with a partner, and it's the same type of person, and it's always a bad relationship. Or you keep befriending coworkers that have the same type of things that you find negative. That
And we validate it.
Right,
We
right.
try to validate it.
You try to validate it, and it's always wrong. Well, that is your shadow self taking over. It's trying to get your attention and tell you you need to work on these things. You need to look at me here and find out why is it that you're repeating this cycle. So this is where the psychological part of the shadow self and the the spiritual or psychic part that we were talking about earlier. Working on yourself is looking back into a behavior that you're not happy with, uncomfortable with, or wish you could have worked on or could work on. A fear. You're wanting to really look back and try that past hobby that you wanted to try that you felt for some reason you weren't good enough to try. You work on those to like identify what that was. And it's not that you want to totally forget about it or anything like that, because forgetting about it is what's putting it back in the shadows. You want to accept it, understand it, learn from it, and move forward. And by accepting that part of you and that moment in time that happened, whatever it was, it is making it so it's not controlling your life. And that's what you're trying to do with the shadow work, is to work on those things from the past that are prohibiting you from opening up and developing your self into your authentic self as who you really are, even your spiritual self, your psychic self. I mean, there's many blockages that could be happening there that is preventing you from advancing in your psychic abilities and your psychic development and just enjoying life to who you are. A lot of us are not who we truly are. We think we are, but there's much that you have to deal with from your past to be able to recognize and acknowledge what it was that you've done, even if it's something that you did that you're ashamed of that you did as a child or as an adult or in the workforce, or driving down the road and you flip somebody off and you never do stuff like that, but you feel guilty about it. Just anything. And that may be something that you felt ashamed of. Well, shame is a primary one in your past that could cause you to not really vibrations and stuff that we talk about, and not be able to really advance in what you're doing. That's a big blocker there, in my opinion.
Oh yeah,
The
unhealed
the shame and
wounds.
stuff.
Yeah, unhealed wounds. Whether
Hmm.
it's something you feel shame about, or like the unhealed, you have an unhealed wound about 10-year-olds laughing at you
Hmm.
while you're trying to read. And it's a very real wound, because I mean that wasn't very nice, and that was meant to be painful. And these can manifest and keep you from being your true psychic self. Because a lot of
Yeah, because
times,
ego grabs
ego,
that.
yeah, yeah, ego's going to run with that.
Yep. It's going to grab those and it's going to hold you back. It's going to keep using that shame and put it in its talk. And that talk is your inner voice. And that inner voice is telling you you're not good enough. How you should be ashamed of yourself for when you do anything. I mean, it just builds and builds and builds. So a lot of times the shadow work may require, depending on how difficult your past experience is, may actually require therapy, counseling by a professional as well, not just you working on it yourself. Some will require outside help to help you work through things. And it could take a while, you know, could take years, depending on what it is that you have in your past. But a lot of it you can work through and address and come to accept, work through, acknowledge, move forward on your own. I found that in my research there were parts of the shadow that show up in our life now from our past. It could be things like you're prone to procrastination, you're prone to being passive aggressive, you have the victimization attitude, stuff like that. Things like that. Those are generated from that shadow self that you need to work through. In my research, I found some practices that you can do for shadow work, and Carrie's going to cover some that she did research on as well. And one thing is to observe your reactions and practice being conscious, which means, try to find out what are your triggers, what and who makes you have a reaction. And I know I've talked about different reactions that I've had to things on the episode, on the podcast. And it made me realize I do have a lot of shadow work to do myself.
Well, but we all do.
But yeah,
When you think about how old you are and how long you've been on the earth, and of course, no
yeah,
one is exempt from shadow work. Because there's always going to be something there.
right, right. And so while you're in a mindful state, you can do self observation, try to figure out why, what about that situation triggered you. And when was the last time you felt that? When did you first feel that trigger in your past? Do you remember feeling that? And that may take you back to the actual situation from your past where that trigger began, because you're having these triggers for a reason. And it's not just because somebody annoyed you. There had to have been a trigger way back in the past that made you feel like when someone does that, that really gets me mad, or that why does that happen? Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Okay. Also, a thing you can do is practice emotional inquiry and complete the emotional cycle. This is one that I really need to work on, because this is, you would ask yourself the question, what am I feeling, when this happens? Why am I feeling this? Why am I feeling so sad? Or why do I feel angry? Why do I feel, just you're sitting there and you feel these emotions. Why am I feeling that? If it's not like somebody else in the other room that's crying because they have something going on and you're an empath and you're picking up on it, it's different than that. It's just, why am I feeling this? Because there are times whenever I may be sitting there saying, I'm just not good enough for this. Or why am I feeling this? I'm not feeling lovable. There's those, well, why? Why am I all of a sudden feeling that when I'm not even interacting with anybody, and I don't believe I'm having a psychic connection or an empathic connection at this time? Why? Well, I can go back to times in my past whenever I really felt that way as a child and have to work through that and come to terms with that and let myself know that no, that's a wrong feeling. I was loved at that time. I was, good enough. It's just that was not the time for that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then, of course, there's the journaling aspect of everything that we talk about with everything is journal, journal, journal. And with that, you're just writing down what's happening at that time that you're feeling it. And that's where you explore it from the past, because once you put it down on paper, as Carrie has said before, when you write it down, that makes it real. So then you can really look at it and work through the feelings, the emotions, the scenario that took place in your memory of that situation, and you can analyze it, acknowledge it, and not let that hold you back in the future. Not let it hold you back anymore. You're done with that. That part you acknowledge, you can deal with it, you accept it, you accept you. You could do the meditation to sit there and help you work through the situations that you are experiencing. It's very, very important to do that. And this is the one that since we started doing the shadow work, since I started doing the research on the shadow work, my dreams have been very in my face.
Well, and that does come up because that's one
Yes.
of the things is your dreams.
Yes.
They have many meanings, whether they're psychic, whether it's dream work, whether it's your body. You're just trying to process what happened today at work. You know, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. But mine have been dreams about broken things and animals. Animals have been broken, dreams have been broken, um, items have been broken. Just dreams have been about
Something's
broken
broken.
things.
Something's broken. It
Things
needs
are
fixed.
broken. Yeah.
Something
So
needs
it's like,
fixed.
I get it. It's like,
Well, about time.
yeah. So it's like, okay, okay, I get it. I should be working on this one. I am working on it.
Well, there's that spiritual thump
Anyway,
on the forehead.
yeah, yeah. So with your dreams, you do need to write down those dreams and try to figure out what it is that they're telling you in the dreams and then work on that from your past. So, Carrie, what do you have on your part of it?
Okay, well, one thing that is kind of important is if you practice with the craft, if you practice witchcraft, occultism, or esoteric traditions, you really need shadow work because it's very important to those practices because magic is about working with unseen forces, and the most powerful unseen force is your own unconscious mind. So if these are some of your practices that you do, you may need to do some shadow work just to kind of get where you need to be. Because if you do not acknowledge your shadow, it will influence your spiritual practice in hidden ways, and unhealed wounds, like we said earlier, can manifest. And these can manifest as, if you do practice these particular things, spells cast from a place of insecurity, fear, or revenge, or seeking power or control over others rather than true transformation, or using magic to fix external problems instead of facing inner wounds. So if these are your practices, the real power for you comes from integration. I think, well, but real power for all of us actually from integrating. But a witch who understands their shadow is a witch who cannot be controlled by it.
Mm.
So if you do practice any of the occult or witchcraft or any of those items, this shadow work is very important for your spiritual work, and for the practice that you do. Now, there are dark archetypes and shadow work. And so if you have these particular deities like Lilith, that's the untamed, rebellious female energy rejecting suppression. Hecate, I can always get that wrong, goddess of the crossroad, guiding seekers into the unknown. Kali, the fear destroyer of illusions, bringing necessary destruction for rebirth. And of course, with astrology would be Pluto, and that's the planet of transformation, revealing hidden wounds and power. So if you want to work with an archetype, these would be one of the archetypes that could help you integrate the shadow aspects rather than suppressing them. And then there's different practices you could do for shadow work, and Kim touched on a few of these. Of course, shadow work meditation. And again, we've talked about before, there's different, some people can't visualize. So if this type of meditation doesn't work, I'm sure we can find one that will. But close your eyes and visualize a door in front of you. Nothing fancy, just a door. And you just imagine stepping into a space that represents your unconscious mind. So that could look like anything. It's just that's what, when you walk into that room, that's your unconscious mind. And then just, what do you see? Is there a figure? Is there a message? Is there a forgotten memory? And instead of running, you want to sit with whatever appears. So just sit with it, and you want to ask, what do you want to tell me? And just wait. And just, you breathe deeply and integrate any emotions to the surface. So just let them come out. Another way that you could do shadow work is using oracle or tarot cards. Tarot can act as a mirror for the unconscious, revealing hidden emotions and suppressed truths. Some useful questions to ask during a reading would be, what part of myself am I avoiding? What is holding me back from spiritual growth? What do I need to embrace about my shadow? And I thought those were 3 very good suggestions.
Mm-hmm. Those are real good.
Now, dream and symbolic interpretation, and we've talked about dream interpretation a lot, many times. Dreams often reveal shadow material, and that's why writing in your journal your dreams, so you can see if there's any repeating symbols like broken stuff in Kim's dream, dark figures, or intense emotions. So if you've ever had and as psychics, and I think this is true, I could be wrong, but I believe that the more you develop as a psychic, the more your dreams can become more vibrant, more vivid, and have more meaning to them. Unless you're astral traveling, which is, we've touched on that before. But, sometimes the vivid dreams are the ones where you're either trying to work out stuff that's happened through the day or the week, or you're getting messages, and Kim has some really interesting dreams. We've talked about that before. I had one the other day that I was just kind of like, Kim said this in her dream. I bet she could tell me right away what poo means in a dream, and I don't mean Winnie. I mean poo-poo. And as a kid, I had this dream, and there was poo. Oh, I know what that means. I'm like, I knew it. She's had it in her dream long before me, But it's kind of, you also have to figure out what that means for you too, because every dream has a interpretation,
Mm-hmm.
and then you kind of take that interpretation, and then you work it down to, okay, what does that mean to me? Is that resonating with me? How is that resonating with me? And that can kind of lead you to the item that is in your shadow that you need to resolve.
Right.
And so it's kind of funny that, my this particular dream I had to do with some shadow work, didn't it, Kim?
Yes, it did.
Yeah, but thus the poo and not Winnie, but it was just the context of what was going on in that dream. And that kind of made me have to look at, okay, so this is what that usually means when you see, bowel movement in your dream, but what does that mean to me? How does that affect me? How is that dealing with, what does that have to do with my life? And that's where you kind of uncover you pull back the layers of the onion to find out this is what's really in my shadow that I need to accept and release and tell myself it's okay. So that's where a lot of times journaling and your dreams can be very helpful, because if you're not open to shadow work at that moment, and these dreams keep coming, that's spirit trying to get you, and your subconscious trying to get you going. You're not moving further anywhere until you get this fixed. You're not going anywhere until you
Right.
get this fixed.
Yep.
And it can cause problems for you, in
Oh
relationships,
yeah,
yeah, in life
yeah.
choices.
Yeah, your chakras could be
Oh
blocked,
yeah.
and that's why you're not able to, open up the chakra that you're wanting to work on, and why you're still having problems in that area because you've got something from the past that, or in your shadow world, that is actually blocking it. You have to face it, and that'll show up in your dreams too.
Yes. So, and you're more open, and we've talked about that before. You're more open to receive messages, whether spiritually or from your own subconscious, when you're sleeping, because there's no self-talk.
Right.
Ego's asleep. Ego's not in the building at the moment, and that's where messages can get through. That's where a lot of times our loved ones would visit us. I mean, I had a visit from Mom on the same night that I had the poo dream, which Mom was not related to the poo, but it was, she was there to give me comfort,
Yeah.
and that was special. So when your dreams, that you get many things. So the more that you're able to identify and recognize your shadows and releasing them, then I think you'll find your spiritual growth and your psychic abilities are going to amp up, and you're next ready for the next level. But keep in mind that this isn't a one and done thing, because you have many parts of your shadow,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to have shadow to have light. So as a light worker, if that is your path, you have to embrace some of the darkness, because without the darkness there'd be no light, and you're embracing your darkness to make it light. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. You're not going to be getting rid of what took place in your past. That's not going to be totally gone once you deal with it. It's there. You lived it,
But you're handling it.
but
It's not handling
but
you.
you're handling it. It's not taking
Yeah.
effect of the rest of your it's not taking control of the rest of
Yeah,
your
you're
life.
handling it. It's not handling you.
Exactly.
Now, if you prefer a ritual, there is a ritual you could do for shadow integration, and this would require a black candle. And that is a candle to symbolize of shadow acceptance. And you write down the suppressed emotion, belief, or fear, whichever it is you're dealing with. And you want to burn the paper safely. So don't hold it with your fingers. So you're going to hold it with like a metal tong, something fireproof, and you're going to hold it, and you're going to light it. You light your candle. You write down, the suppressed emotion. You put the piece of paper and a metal tong. You're going to light it from that candle, and you're going to burn and just visualize the energy integrating, not being destroyed, but integrating. So it's changing, it's accepting. You're not destroying it, because like you said, it's never going to go away, but you're going to change how you view it, and it no longer has control over you. And then you want to close that ritual with self-compassion, affirming that no part of you is shameful. And I think that's very important with anything. It's affirming that no part of you is shameful. Past experiences also form you. We all know that.
Right.
But we all make mistakes,
Yep.
and we all do things we shouldn't sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And those are learning experiences. Some hurt more than others, but they're learning experiences. But the key thing in shadow work is you're not banishing darkness, but you're making peace with it.
Right.
So you're making peace with a life choice that you made, or you're making peace with the fact that these 10-year-old girls were probably had a bad situation that happened to them, and they were bullying you because you were an easy victim, which caused the cycle.
Right.
And so it's just basically making peace with whatever dark situation you're working on in the process. So just make peace with it. That's how you need to look at it. You're not going to banish it. Making peace. The greatest lesson I think of shadow work is that there is no enlightenment without integrity. The more you suppress, the stronger the shadow becomes. So the more you accept, the freer you become. So whatever that shadow memory is, the more that you're suppressing it and not working on it, the more it controls you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So the more that you can accept and the freer you'll become, and you'll have less triggers because you've come to terms with this. And, true spiritual growth means that you're embracing both light and dark within yourself, because you have light and dark within yourself. That's your yin and your yang. Releasing judgment of negative emotions and experiences. So quit judging, and you're letting that inner voice speak bad about those emotions and experiences, and start owning your wounds, your fears, and your desires without shame. You know what? I own that fear. I own it, but that's okay. There's no shame in that. And then using both intuition and self-awareness as guides. And it will really help you with a more authentic spirituality. But I think we all, like you said at the beginning, want to avoid shadow work because it sounds scary. And then when you find out it's actually bringing up things that you've hidden down deep, well, that is scary.
Mm-hmm. And painful.
And painful. You're ripping a Band-Aid off something that's had a Band-Aid on it for many, 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 many years. And sometimes, especially when it's a shadow aspect where you did wrong, because no one really likes to think about that they had a bully moment where they bullied someone, or they had a moment where they weren't kind and they should have been kind.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And later on, you have that guilt because it was wrong. I mean, especially children, growing up, you've got friends. There are times when you're influenced to do something wrong. Mm-hmm. There's times you do something wrong and then you don't realize it till after you've done it. I should have done that. That was wrong.
Yeah.
There's different things in life, and you're human. And, so dealing with the fact that most people don't want to admit they're wrong.
Yeah.
And that's difficult. But you know what? We're all wrong sometime. I was wrong true. The last time I got married, I can tell you that much. So, we all do something we shouldn't, that leaves some sort of wound. And we can look at it like a lot of times we like to do the knee-jerk response as, spiritual people, that we like to just kind of shake it off as, everything happens for a reason. Mm-hmm. That's and I've said that before.
Oh, I know I have.
Everything happens for a reason, but that's kind of something you say. Like if you're from the South, you're going to say, "Oh, bless you, bless your heart," and that's not a compliment, mm-hmm. Right?
Right.
Well, everything happens for a reason. As a Band-Aid we stick on anything because we don't want to deal with it. That we don't want to deal with an emotion, because let's say something happened, to you, Kim, and you're telling me about it, and I'm like, well, everything happens for a reason, because what happened to you is triggering something in me, mm-hmm. and I don't want to deal with that.
Right.
I don't want that emotion. I don't want to deal with that. So now everything happens for a reason, and I think that we use it as a way of scapegoating.
Yeah, exactly.
Really talking about, well, that happened for a reason, yes, but what was the reason?
I've noticed
there was a reason.
Exactly. I've noticed with myself, especially examining this part, that there's many times I'm physically feeling that in my body whenever that happens, and I didn't realize that gut feeling that I get, that I've said it before, and you're like, I don't like that phrase, that punch in the gut feeling. There's times whenever I physically feel like, oh, that punch in the gut. Why am I feeling that? You know what I mean? Whenever something happens and I physically feel it. Well, I know that's something from the past. It has to be. Yes. Because why do I feel that so strongly? Not just because I'm an empath, but it's more. you could feel it's more.
Yeah, yeah. And remember, empaths have the ability of putting up a mirror to you. So if you're, talking to an empath and all of a sudden that mirror goes up and you're going to get a shadow aspect of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and then you kind of blame the empath.
Right.
I don't like her.
Yep.
She doesn't make me feel good. Well, yeah, because she did the mirror thing that we do. And sometimes we don't realize we're doing that.
Yep.
Because you're seeing it, you don't like that person because they're showing you an aspect of yourself that you don't like you said earlier. And empaths, we're the worst for it. Because empaths have more people not like them without even knowing them, because we are instinctively doing the mirror thing.
Well, for our own protection, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but you're showing their energy back at them,
Right.
and they're seeing something they don't like about it
Mm-hmm.
because it's too real. No, because it's an aspect that they don't want to work on or acknowledge.
Yep.
But that's one thing to keep in mind. If you met someone for the first time and they take a big aversion to you, first of all, you want to, put your spidey senses in order and say, well, what, I wonder what that's about. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't they like me? What happened? How did I feel when I was talking to them? What was going on, and kind of dive into it. And, some people just don't like people. But usually it has something to do with you're affecting their insecurities.
Right.
Whether it's their ego has an issue, you're too pretty, you're too smart, you're too popular, or these things, or dealing with you remind me of something in me I don't want to see.
Right. Or you're reminding me something of wish I could be.
Yeah, which is your insecurity coming through.
Yep.
Where this, and if you just met someone, they don't know you well enough to judge you, and you don't know them well enough to judge them. Now, as psychics, we could get the vibe in the read, but that doesn't make you exempt from them reflecting something back at you that you don't want to see.
Yep. Exactly.
Shoot, you get a couple of empaths in the room with their mirrors up, and this is bouncing back and forth. It's
Ricocheting.
like the cat's laser light toy,
Yeah.
going that around the room. A lot of self-analysis has to be done. This is where journaling can come in handy, because if you get this revelation, write it down on something, because if you're at work, you can't do any spiritual work. Or if you're driving, you're kind of like, okay, make a message,
Mm-hmm.
add this to journal, and then when you have time, go back and process it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Do you have anything else on the shadow work?
Um, I'm, just by working on the shadow, if you find that you are really having problems with manifestation, that could be because of the fact that you need to do some shadow work, because you are subconsciously thinking you don't really deserve this, or you don't really want that. You're having a negative discussion back there in your subconscious mind about how you're not.
I never get my way. It never works out for me. It never.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So you're kind of defeating your purpose in life, or in manifesting, or in anything else you're trying to do, because of the shadow self it's really holding you back. It's really feeding that ego to keep you from really knowing yourself and fulfilling what it is that you want to fulfill in your life. So it's something positive that you can work on, to make it a positive part of your life, is to work with your shadow self, as you said, integrate it into your life and accept it. And then that harmony between ego and spirit can work together like yin and yang, and really make yourself your true authentic self, and know who you really are, and live who you really are and what you want to be.
Yes, absolutely.
I never thought I'd be doing a podcast with you and being comfortable enough to talk about things of my inner self, because I don't talk about myself to people because I'm embarrassed to do that. That is part of the shadow work I've had to work on so far. It works.
Yes, and you're going to live a happier life.
Yep. That's all I got.
Okay. Well, I hope our listeners enjoyed this episode of Shadow Work, and hopefully it resonates with you. If you would like to share any stories about shadow work or suggestions on things that you do to deal with shadow work, email us and let us know. We do respond, as we've repetitively told you. We do respond to emails and such. So, but thank you so much for listening to this episode of Psychic Bent. Bye.
Bye. May your light shine bright. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast, Psychic Bent. If you enjoyed Psychic Bent, please like, follow, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to Psychic Bent. We can be reached on Facebook at Psychic Bent Podcast. Our email address is psychicbent1@gmail.com. May your light shine bright.